If you do analysis, the way in Haryana Congress lost out to Third Front and all of those independents, BJP lost out 6 seats, Muslim seats with Muslim candidates in Kashmir Valley because of the independents. They also did not do effective micromanagement in the Kashmir Valley. What one BJP leader told me was they went into for nano-management, looking at every single candidate who can, pull away 1,000, 2,000 votes away from Congress party, empowering those candidates.
This old guard-based politics, which Congress has been accused of doing in Haryana, that needs to change.
I don't think Congress did anything wrong by giving the charge whole soul to the Hudas.
The voter in Kashmir went for a viable winner. They saw Omar Abdullah as the likely person to form government. Hi and welcome back to episode 32 of the India Dialogue. We're so happy you're here. My name is Ruchir. I'm joined by Manu and a special guest today, Rajat Sethi, for a second time. Let me introduce both of them. Manu, my co-host, is a lawyer and advocate with his own law practice and a spokesperson for DMK. Rajat is a political analyst. He's previously advised two chief ministers, I believe, and you might see him on TV very often. I'm Ruchir. I'm the CEO at Distributed Energy and chair at School of Policy and Governance. Every week we go through affairs that matter to India. We try to cover it from different aspects. It is so wonderful to have different voices on this show because then we can hopefully agree and have friendly disagreements. Today we'll start off by discussing recent political elections. We covered them when they were about to take place, Haryana and Jammu and Kashmir. We now have the results. Two interesting scenarios played out in both the elections, especially because of exit polls and expectations. How the expectations, especially in Haryana, was that there will be an anti-incumbency fallout and BJP might lose. The exit polls seem to have indicated that BJP will lose badly, but exit polls were incredibly wrong and BJP is back in power. And similarly in Jammu and Kashmir, Jammu and Kashmir was a different result. Perhaps I come back to that in terms of talking about it because the dynamics there are relatively different, and we should discuss that. Manu, do you want to open by talking about especially the Haryana results and how and where that is?
I really want to set the stage up for Rajat to comment because I too, like many people, thought that Haryana was a done deal, and it seemed that way. Exit polls seem to indicate that way. Of course, I will, I think, be careful to say that the exit polls were not completely wrong because I believe that they do a very difficult job, but they did predict which way the swing was happening. And I think by all data that we have, Congress did improve its tally and jumped, I think, maybe 12 or 13% from the earlier election in 2019. So, of course, they did a better job than last time, but this is not a proportional representation political system or democratic system. It is a first past the post system. So what really is required is the number of seats. So the conversion from an increased vote share or an increased sort of swing in your direction to winning number of seats. And I think that's where according to me, I felt perhaps Congress did not consolidate its votes better. There was disunity, I'm being told, within the party itself, and of course, they should have been like a poll for where all the other opposition outfits should have come together, which I believe also did not happen. So I think really my understanding of Haryana is based on what I've spoken to people who went there to do exit polls and do sort of research there. But I'm sure, Rajat, you've been following the election much more closely. So do you agree with much of what I said, or do you have a view that is very different? If so, please tell us.
Thank you, Ruchir and Manu, for inviting me yet again onto this this podcast wherein we can pause and sort of reflect on more deeper sense, a more deeper level of analysis, cutting the clutter that goes on in television discussions. So it's always wonderful, coming on to this podcast. Now, to your question, Manu, I think there are a couple of things. Exit polls were wrong in vote share, and that's blasphemy when it comes to statistics. I mean, you can't be this off. Uh, Everybody was saying that BJP is going to hold on to its base, but BJP did better than they have done historically. Uh, Congress was projected to go past 40 easily, comfortably. They were shy of 40% vote share mark. So when both the BJP vote share was under accounted for and Congress vote share was over accounted in these exit polls, um, somehow the gap conversion, BJP got slightly hairline higher vote share as compared to Congress party. There were multiple reasons why the exit polls got wrong and why our exit polls in general are seeing a secular decline in credibility. And why is it? What are the methodologies that are potentially going wrong? What are they missing out? What is the nature of the electorate shifting, which is not getting captured by these exit polls? There are a whole host of discussions around it. I just did a podcast at Center for Policy Research with some academicians to understand where are the statistical numbers failing us. But if I were to, keep that exit poll assessment aside, uh, from a political standpoint, if I were to unwrap what happened, first thing is that 10% positive swing of a vote share on the ground seems to be much more vocal, much more profound. You can feel that extra 10% coming in your way, and especially when it is from the dominant community. So the Jats form that dominant culture, dominant caste within the state of Haryana, more vocal, and when they were coming in lock, stock, and barrel towards the Congress, it gave them a sense that it's a done and dusted deal. Then there are the non-dominant caste, which we saw a silent consolidation, so much so that even the BJP did not anticipate that the dominant caste coming in and swaying the election in its favor is going to do counter consolidation so acutely, so much so that BJP would record its highest ever number. That wasn't accounted for. And at the end of the day, what was a solid presumption that went into Congress's poll management was that you will at least get 70 to 80% of chart vote. What certain post-poll analysis of CSDS data has shown that only 50 to 52% of charts polled in favor of Congress party. So what worked for the Congress party was larger mahal. The chemistry part of it worked really well for them. And they were able to see those numbers reflecting on the ground, and they thought everything is hunky-dory. But micromanagement, what one BJP leader told me was they went into for nano-management. They said that they went after such level of minute detailing, looking at every single candidate who can pull away 1,000, 2,000 votes away from Congress party, empowering those candidates, ensuring they don't sit out, they contest, so much so that there were around 450 independent candidates in the state of Haryana, which ate away several important votes for the Congress party. Otherwise, the big swing that was happening in vote share would have resulted in Congress's win. So that's the nut and shell of what happened over there. Another thing that Congress sort of suffered as a jolt was that the key issues around which it thought that it can completely sway the state, even the non-dominant caste or the OBC caste in that state, non-Jat caste and communities, it would be successful in creating that social coalition around these core issues, be it the farmer issue, the recruitment, the Agniveer issue. These are like the most, they were assumed to be that they would create enough of public angst that people across the caste cleavages will come together and support the Congress party. either the assumption of Congress party was wrong and they over assumed the anger. They did not realize that maybe people are okay with some of the farm benefits, like I mean, as a matter of fact, bulk of the MSP procurement benefits go to Haryana. Bulk of the 6,000 scheme of PM Kisan was originated by speaking to some of the farm leaders out of Haryana. All of those things, maybe BJP was able to blunt the anger that Congress was relying heavily upon. So, in short, not doing enough of micromanagement, not keeping your ears close to the ground, and celebrating the win even before it was locked in for the Congress party became sort of the reason, in my opinion. Calling it out too soon.
The old saying that there's no real certainty in politics, whereas too many people were too certain of this outcome anyway. The other point that I think many commentators, Rajat, including I recently read Veer Sanghvi in one of the online publications, made was that this old guard based politics or old guard led politics or state politics, which Congress is, I think, been accused of doing in Haryana, that needs to change. And do you think having someone like Mr. Huda, who is on one hand, his supporters would say that having a proven, time-tested chief former chief minister shows stability, and that you have the sort of the stature as a party to form government, as opposed to this what his detractors would say are, he just, it's that nobody wants, he's been rejected now 2 or 3 times in the hustings, so this is the time that you should go for a wholesale change. Where do you stand on that argument, Rajat, just to understand?
See, I mean, objectively speaking, I don't think Congress did anything wrong by giving the charge whole soul to the Hudas. Um, it was, the ball was in the Huda's court to actually be large hearted, more accommodative, and sort of leave some political space for his detractors also to be, subsumed into a winning caravan. He still remains the tallest leader, and he almost pulled it off for the Congress party, sans the micromanagement. So I for one feel that he had delivered in the 2024 Haryana Lok Sabha elections, because he was able to replace tickets in Hisar and Sirsa, went against party's high command, went against the detractors within the state, and gave it to two leaders whom he believed can win, and they actually won. And I'm of the view that once you give the charge to an individual leader who is a regional satrap, can carry the weight forward together. Plus his son giving an old and new mix, reaching out to the youth along with the traditional voters, everything was good. It's just that they started celebrating too soon, and they just took the eye away from there's this classic saying in English, slip between cup and the lip. And I think that's where they sort of missed it.
Much of the narrative around some of the state elections is set by national media, and the reality often on the ground has been different. And I've seen that time and again, and personally experienced it in a few cases. My question is, we had assumed that the farmer issue was still a really burning issue. We had assumed that there is dissatisfaction, especially, like I said, because that was a national narrative that we saw. How did that play out? And especially, I want to focus on the farmers issue, because we had people on the street march to Delhi. Why is the sentiment different now as opposed to 12 months ago?
I think sentiment hasn't changed much. People who have been opposed to the farm reforms are still opposed to it. Just that sheer number on that side of the balance is much smaller than people who either don't care, or they believe that the stranglehold of the rich and the big farmers over the gains of the MSP tends to squeeze them out of the gains. I mean, we all know how Haryana and the and Punjab's farm structures are. It is largely fed by the UP and Bihar labors. These are the two states which tend to amass maximum benefits of MSPs. There are much poorer states like Punjab, Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, Jharkhand, Haryana, West Bengal. They do not have even a minuscule percentage of the benefits of MSP going to them. So this entire MSP structure was in itself skewed in favor of them. You bring in crop diversification policies, they don't agree to it. You bring in, pollution related reforms, they don't agree to it. And who are these people effectively? They are ideologically motivated, select few rich farmers who are opposed to any idea of reforms which can divide the fruits of agricultural labor across the value chain. And this is where BJP was convinced that what they are doing is correct. And they might have fallen into the pressure of the physical mobilization on the streets more than the electoral mobilization.
I do believe there is such a thing as a vocal majority, vocal minority. But um, yeah, I hear you, and I mean, obviously the results have panned out differently. I want to take this opportunity to also try and segue to the Kashmir election, especially talking about like different communities and how there was a clear demarcation. Like the Kashmir region, I believe National Conference and Congress Alliance won 41 seats, and then Jammu, BJP won 29 seats. The exit polls were not as off, obviously, as Haryana. They were still slightly off. But like, are these two different states? I mean, it felt like at least people in both these places view state government differently. Actually, one question, and Manu, before that, by the way, is JNK still a state or about to become a state? And then maybe you can talk about the split of the votes.
So yeah, this is something I did. I mean, I'm to be very honest, I'm very confused about. So the statehood was, as you know, removed, right? And there was a plea for restoration. And even when the Supreme Court ruled on Article 370, which was late last year in December 2023, the judgment says that. The Solicitor General undertakes that on behalf of the Union government that statehood will be restored and elections will be held. But there was no clarity at that point, and at still very much the point till the notification of the elections itself, it was Union territories. In fact, bifurcated into Union territories. Now, once the elections were announced, I was wondering whether the election announcement should be preceded by a restoration to statehood, right? And then you say only a state assembly can have a legislative assembly per se. So that part they did not clarify. Of course, Delhi is like a hybrid form. It's a quasi state, but also a national capital territory. You have others like Pondicherry, which are territories, union territories, but have an assembly nevertheless. So now that the elections are done, I'm hoping, just for clarity, the government must come out and say that the statehood has been restored, because otherwise this does not make sense. Because like I said, the two important statehood changes are, one is removal of the statehood and the second is the bifurcation into the union territory. So now that it seems like by having a combined election, they've brought everybody, all the territories back together. They've undone the bifurcation, but they don't seem to have restored the statehood. I learned a little while earlier that there is a plea in Supreme Court for restoration of statehood. So that clearly means that as on date, that is the fact. But Rajat, you can use that to take us also through your thoughts on the statehood portion, but also tell us how you read the election outcome there, because the main sort of arguments that were placed, that were advanced, were that Jammu and Kashmir, by and large, the security situation and other situation has improved considerably, that people have come out and voted in larger numbers. One. Secondly, that there is wide ranging support for abrogation of Article 370, and by virtue of which, what has been done. Of course, though there has been Supreme Court's endorsement for the abrogation of Article 370, I would think it's fair to say the BJP thought that there was also popular support, and perhaps this election has shown that that may not be the case. But how do you read on all these lines, Rajat? Please tell us.
So, first thing, Manu, the bifurcation of the erstwhile Jammu and Kashmir state, which included Ladakh, that first bifurcation happened that Ladakh was created as a different union territory and Jammu and Kashmir was created as a separate union territory. That, through constitutional amendments, etc., was done. And to restore the statehood, as has been promised by all the political parties, including the BJP, would be done. The date is something which it would, they would want to see how does a elected government sort of navigate through some of the challenges, because this is the first elected government that has come in post 370. Does it throw new dimensions to the challenge or not? How do things pan out? Looking at the national security standpoint, that decision would be taken. It would require constitutional changes again, so that you restore the statehood to the state. Of course, the assembly will, I'm sure during the first sitting itself, the Jammu and Kashmir Assembly will pass a resolution saying that we want a statehood, and they will submit that resolution. So the paperwork will be put in place. But when would the central government take that decision? They will have to look at the largest national security calculus and what's happening in that state. That's one thing. But during the elections, we saw that BJP, Congress, and JKNC, the National Conference, everybody said that statehood is non-negotiable and should be restored. And I believe that broad consensus is a positive sign, and we will see things moving in that direction. Now, what has happened in the elections itself is quite interesting. There was an alliance between the National Conference and the Congress Party. They two came together because, the National Conference believed that, while they were doing good in the Kashmir Valley, they would not want to split the Muslim vote there and sort of, create unnecessary confusions while they were easily emerging as the polar polity because of Mehbooba Mufti's credibility being destroyed and shredded. Omar Abdullah was also a little scared because he lost his own Lok Sabha election, and that had sent him some rude realization that he cannot assume that everything will fall in place for him. So he wanted to be doubly sure. Therefore, he went into an alliance with the understanding that the Muslim votes would not be dominated, would not be split, and Congress Party would be able to do substantially well in the Jammu area. Jammu people in the audience tend to believe is a monolith Hindu region, Hindu dominant region, and Kashmir is the dominant Muslim region, which is not true. The Pir Panjal and the Chenab Valley belt in the Jammu area is Muslim dominated. So if you have, say, 43 seats, 16 seats in Jammu alone are Muslim dominated. It's only that the remaining 27 odd seats are Hindu dominated, where BJP perhaps did exceedingly well. There were new seats which were added post delimitation to Jammu to sort of bring in parity. The LG, the Lieutenant Governor, was given to the mandate to nominate 5 MLAs into the assembly, which could have, if BJP had the right numbers, the whole calculus could have gone into their way, establishing sort of a parity between the representations of Jammu and Kashmir together. That was the whole purpose of not just the delimitation exercise, but also LG having that extra sway in the assembly. BJP, singular promise for the BJP was statehood and then, development and all of those things. But Congress's plank was confused. And this is why Congress did so badly. Not just in the Kashmir area, but predominantly they were expected to do a lot of heavy lifting in Jammu. They did not do anything of that sort. In fact, they just barely they did not win even a single Hindu seat. So there's no Hindu MLA from the Congress party, which they were expected to be able to, really make that dent. And Agniveer is an issue. Agniveer, by the way, was presumed to be an issue in that entire upper north belt: Jammu, Punjab, Haryana, Uttarakhand, Himachal. That was like the big hole that Congress was expecting that has been created because of Agniveer, and they can really reap the benefits out of it. It did not happen. Congress on 370 was shaky. In Kashmir Valley, they wanted to say that we will bring back 370 article. In Jammu, they were non-committal. So that confusing position, policy position of Congress was utilized by the BJP. And BJP's own game plan was that they will sweep the Jammu area and they would get anywhere between 32 33 seats. And through the independents, they would be able to stop Omar Abdullah's party to a considerable sense. But one mistake that the BJP did, which foiled their plans, according to me, was it was too apparent that all of these independents that were going out and contesting, be it Sajjad Lone or be it Engineer Rashid and all of their supported candidates, were BJP's B team. When you get that tag of being a B team of some party, voters tend to be wary of it. If they want to vote out a party, they will go and go after only that party which can effectively defeat the BJP. So that's where BJP made a mistake. It became too apparent. Why did Engineer Rashid won sitting in Tihar jail? Because he made that as a pivotal point, that for every vote you are breaking my chains that have chained me inside the jail. So he built that emotional momentum and was able to win a Lok Sabha sitting inside the jail. But in this election, he was released. He was able to distribute resources, and people smelled it. They said that this is a B team operating, and we should not vote for them. So this consolidated votes in favor of Omar Abdullah. So this is, in short, what happened. BJP emerged as number one party by vote share, but not enough to unseat NC and Congress combined. But the party for the Congress party did not end in sweet note. They were expecting that after winning 6 odd seats, they would at least get a deputy chief minister. And they really tried negotiating very hard with Omar Abdullah. But at the end of the day, they don't have a single minister. And they certainly don't have a deputy chief minister as well. So they're supporting from outside.
But they picked the Hindu chief minister from Jammu. So I mean, Omar Abdullah is clearly interested in.
But Ruchir, that is National Conference. That is not Congress party.
No, I agree. As in, sorry, let me reframe that. I agree with you. I'm saying that Omar Abdullah over Congress picked the Hindu MP from Jammu. So clearly he's MLA here.
But Ruchir, you cannot disenfranchise half the region. 50% of the population stays, or maybe more, stays in Jammu. You'd require an adequate amount of representation, because there is a direct wedge between the way Jammu voted. Predominantly, it voted for a BJP-led government, and predominantly the Kashmir Valley voted for an Omar Abdullah-led NC government. When you have such a big split, you have to make that overture so that you look and sound on paper that you are a pan Jammu and Kashmir government.
Would have been interesting to see, had BJP formed government, whether they would have had a Muslim deputy chief minister, or same Muslim chief minister and a Hindu deputy chief minister.
It is impossible, Manu, to sort of rule in Jammu and Kashmir without having that balance. It's impossible. And BJP realizes that. In fact, by the way, if you do analysis, the way in Haryana, Congress lost out to Third Front and all of those independents, BJP lost out 6 seats, Muslim seats with Muslim candidates in Kashmir Valley because of the independents. They also did not do effective micromanagement in the Kashmir Valley. They ate into the votes. So in a lot of places, if you do the data analysis in Kashmir Valley, you will understand that BJP lost 6 seats by a wafer thin margin.
Fair enough. And while, Omar Abdullah is back in the chief minister's chair, after 2009, I think, or 2009 to 14, when he was last the chief minister, I think really somebody who, we watched very closely. So Mehbooba Mufti and her party, they have really dropped. I mean, is this an outcome of having, is she taking the blame for the alliance with the BJP, and that led to sort of was at the helm when Article 370 and the suspension of the Legislative Assembly and all of that happened in 2018? Or is the PDP just sort of going a little bit out of vogue for now, and is not doing as well as the other regional party, the National Conference. What do you guys think?
In my view, if you ask me, the first and foremost thing is that PDP was about Mufti Mehbooba Mufti's father. It was Mufti Saab. It was about his own personal credibility, his gravitas, his politics, around which the PDP was created and thrived all these years. Mehbooba, in my sort of humble opinion, she doesn't command the amount of respect that her father commanded. So after his demise, things sort of plummeted for her, and she was not able to hold on to her own party. A lot of prominent leaders from her party left and joined the NC. So it was hollowed out from within. And second, she did not oversee, 370 or dissolution of the statehood and all. She was in alliance with the BJP, and she withdrew the alliance, or the alliance broke apart well before 2019 370 abrogation and all of that happened. So she was away from there, but her non-clarity of her politics, her alliance with BJP, and that uncomfortable situation which was created around pivotal ideological positions that she used to hold, sort of created that confusion and contradiction among her voters' mind, and they all gravitated towards the NC.
I think some of that is true, especially around the clarity, the amount of leaders leaving and the clarity around the vision. But I think one thing is the voter in Kashmir went for a viable winner. And I think that was partly what it seems to me was a factor in PDP doing so badly, which was that they saw Omar Abdullah as the likely person to form government. So I think that also reduced her vote share dramatically.
That does. I mean, anybody who's been in the valley knows that this was in the making. Her political capital being eroded was something which was, it was in the making.
Super. So I think domestic politics will continue to, I think, occupy a lot of our mind space, because as we've sort of seen, there's now I think elections called to Maharashtra, which will go in end of November, and also Jharkhand, right? So I think that this is all going to start picking up a lot of pace. But if we sort of had to pan out, and this has really been one of the highlight topics for news media discussions this week, which has been the rock bottom of the India-Canada relations. I don't think any of us should or act or feel surprised, because I think we saw this coming, right? So one of my first reactions to this, as and when the Canadian government and the Prime Minister made those revelations earlier this week, that they have shared some, according to them, credible intelligence or evidence of Indian government and its agents being involved in criminal activity on Canadian soil, as they put it. I think we should have all seen this coming, because after the initial statements made late last year, second half of last year, I think it was only a matter of time. Now, this is where I think the real question is around diplomacy, right? Now, it is not impossible or improbable that two countries' relations could get soured, especially on an issue like this, right? And I think it's happened time and again, and it will happen in the future. But my first sort of point that I want you both to consider is, shouldn't effective diplomacy solve this behind closed doors? Because now it's come to a place where you can't sort of put it back into the box, right? And of course the situation is escalated with recalling slash expelling of senior diplomats, essentially now sort of narrowing the scope for actual diplomatic engagement. So has diplomacy failed us, is one. The second point that I want to sort of you both to consider is, now, what do you do in a situation like this? There is a country which claims to have enough intelligence to initially sort of give us the the prima facie uh, suggestion that there is involvement of the Indian government or its agents, but now they say that they have some evidence. Now, of course, they're not going to disclose that evidence. They're not going to put it in public domain. They may, and this is, I think, a game that will be played, which is that India may dare them to show the evidence or keep claiming that no evidence was shown, but Canada, I don't think, will take the bait and come and put it in public domain either, because that would affect the sanctity and integrity of the whole police investigation slash their judicial process, right? So, but then now that this has happened, and you do have some evidence that is being placed before you, let us say, what should a government do in such a scenario, which would do you um, do you want recall and close off diplomatic engagement, or do you say that larger interests of Indians living in Canada or Indo-Canadian trade is much larger importance and significance to this one issue? So this one allegation seems to be about one group of people, so we will try to uh, replace them, or do something that will save or salvage the larger relationship. These are the two real questions I had to kickstart. Rajat, would you like to start us off, and then we'll go over to Ruchir?
So, Manu, I think one thing that I'm hearing from all the chatter that we are getting from Twitter and opinion pieces that are being written, that there is a fine line of difference between intelligence and evidence. Intelligence is, sans admissibility in the courts. Those are loose pieces of dots, and you can connect the dots in the way you feel like, and sort of act on it. You act on intelligence. You don't take intelligence to the courts, right? And I think this is where the US has had a similar sort of an issue around Panun, and the way US and India, like two mature democracies, are trying to handle this situation is in sharp contrast with which India and Canada are trying to handle their own mutual relationship. This also, stems from the basic intent. US seems to have the basic intent not to throw the relationship out of the window. Canada doesn't seem to care, because they have the local constituents and local politics dominating the current time window, and that is sort of determining the way they are taking things forward. Otherwise, India sent a similar investigating team to the US. They found if there was a raw agent. They said that first we are removing him from the government service immediately, and then we are putting, under investigations our own Indian systems investigating that rogue raw agent. And they've been doing a lot of back channel deliberations with the US, and US also understands the sensibilities around which India's concerns are sort of legitimate. And I have spoken to n number of think tanks in the US, and none of them seem to be siding with a disproportionate amount of weightage being given to free speech. And under the garb of free speech, you go out and do whatever the hell you feel like, even putting up posters of our council journals of San Francisco and literally putting a bounty on their head. All of those are absolutely illegal activities, and should have resulted in arrests of such criminal individuals, both in Canada and the US. No criminal penal actions have been taken against them, but there has been a greater respect of India's position by the US, and not so by the Canadians. And Canadians, I mean Trudeau alone. Therefore, when you see him making depositions before that committee, he was all over the place. He's like, no, I don't have conclusive evidences, but I have intelligence. And like, he's also now harping that I don't know what's going to happen with those loose dots that he's going to put before the RCMP is actually going to put forth the courts, and how a court's going to take it. It's like he preempted and like jumped before the gun on this issue with a larger ulterior motive. And if the motive is misaligned, then you lose the entire moral position around it. And I think this is where two situations have such drastically different approaches.
No, it's very interesting. You compare the US and the Canada, and Richard, please take that forward. But also, if you can touch upon the diplomacy, or whether diplomacy has failed us, or we have failed diplomacy.
You might be underestimating how much US and Canada are aligned on this, and this might be US using Canada to make India the villain as opposed to US wanting to do so. I mean, ultimately, the Five Eyes share intelligence very, very closely, and obviously, the word is that the US shared the intelligence on this issue to begin with Canada. Until then, Canada didn't even know that there is a chance of India having assassinated the people in question. One thing I have always struggled with is the West always cares more about its own sovereignty, obviously, than other sovereignty. I mean, like, where is the condemnation for murdering the Hezbollah leader from Israel on Iranian soil? I mean, I think there are so many incidents, and this is just last week. I mean, like, we can go backwards in terms of how the West approaches so many of its extrajudicial killings, but they create as much noise as they do because the killing is on their soil. I think uh, one one thing at play, obviously here, which got mentioned, is the migration. And given the amount of migration that has taken place from India to Canada now, over the last 30 or 40 years, so many of these Indians have become Canadian citizens and are an important voting bloc. And it is clear that Justin Trudeau is not in a strong position to hold on to power. And this is one of the issues where Indians do have a strong view on the ground, and he is keen to motivate them in favor of his party. I was in Canada earlier this year, and for the first time in my life, I've been to gurudwaras or temples all over the world. For the first time in my life, I saw posters of around Khalistan and its referendum on the walls or fences of Gurudwara. So it is a really, really hot topic amongst the South Asian or the Sikh community in Canada, and it's a heavily discussed topic. So that part of it makes sense. The last piece on diplomacy, I think people, diplomats being asked to leave and so on, is sort of par for the course in the circumstances. But I also think that the practical steps that could have been taken were far earlier than how it has played out now, in that India has been expressing its concern very, very strongly for a very long period of time around the separatist conversation that takes place in Canada or in Australia or in UK. I mean, we know, Manu, you and I have come across like conversations in Australia, especially, and the strong objections the Indian government has on that conversation taking place on Australian soil. So Canada could have taken certain steps to appease India, especially around the sensitivity of this issue. And that's the last comment I want to make, which is that I think Canada has generally not really understood how important the separatism conversation is to India, and why, if they had taken this seriously, I mean, they didn't take the Kanishka bombing seriously, the Air India case and so on, some of this would have resulted in a very different outcome, I think. So that is sort of my view on the diplomacy part.
Can I add one thing on the separatism movements? I mean, one movement that I'm a little familiar with is the Tamil Elam movement, right? Which, in Tamil Nadu and other parts of the world also, it really sort of took shape after 1983, and there was about 20 odd years where they almost established a de facto state, until the end of the civil war in 2009. Now, the difference is this, right? And even the Tamil Elam supporters and pro Elam separatist movements, which fanned out across the world in the same countries we've just spoken about, typically Canada, the UK, and Australia. They sort of led a lot of the advocacy for it internationally, and also they've funded a lot of the movement within Sri Lanka, and to sort of fund even the de facto state, so to speak. The difference that I see starkly here is to be honest, I don't know if this is like a chicken and egg situation, right? I had not really heard of the pro Khalistan separatist movement until the Indian government started paying a little bit more attention to it. And I don't know if I've been turning a blind eye towards that, but I didn't hear about it. So Ruchir and I was in Australia until 2008, where I studied for 6.5 years, and I didn't hear about it at that time. Okay, and it definitely the 12 for 15 years I've been in India since then, I've not heard about it in India, and it's not part of our domestic political discourse, right? It seems to still operate in pockets. I concede in these countries, in Canada and the UK especially, but are we paying too much attention? Are we getting, is this too much of a overreaction from our government, considering there is no real base for them in India, or within and around Punjab? Are we over reading the pro Khalistani movement? I know it's, of course, I'm not getting into the freedom of speech argument and all of that, because our Article 19, expressly prohibits, speaking about anything that challenges the sovereignty and integrity of the country. So that if you speak on separatism within India, then you do not have a freedom of speech. Of course, this freedom of speech threshold is different in other countries. But without getting into all of that, are we over reading this pro Khalistan movement in the last few years, or is it a proportionate reading of it? Rajat, do you want to go first and then back to Ruchir?
Yeah, so I'll give a very quick response on that. See, you are right. This wasn't gaining critical mass just a few years back. But then, when I came back from the US and I started working in the policy circles, working closely with the Home Ministry and internal security issues, what I realized was that our security establishment started picking up a lot of intelligence around referendum 2020. This was something which started gaining traction around 2016 2017, and government of India then through its multiple embassies and other state non-state actors tried to reach out back channel to sort of mitigate this referendum 2020 which was brought around. I mean, if you still Google referendum 2020, that was a lot of capital was mobilized to actually fuel passion, fuel commentary, fuel narrative around it, etc., etc. So much so that our intelligence agency also realized that some of the capital found its way back into India. It was funneled in to stoke some of those sentiments. At least attempts were being made. So something which appeared like it's a complete trivial thing happening somewhere with some fanatics trying to take India's sovereignty for a ride, and that might not swing the needle for us. Suddenly, it became much more serious around the time of 2020 2021. Around that time, we saw much more buzz in the security establishment, and I think that's when uh, the videos of Panu threatening mass annihilation of one religion, and putting these photographs of our embassy officials and high commission officials putting bounties on their head and doing all kinds of absolutely criminal activities, literally shooting at the high commissioner's photograph outside certain gurudwaras, and they were deliberately trying to stoke the sentiments. I still believe that predominantly the Sikh community does not adhere with any of this. These are absolute micro minorities, but this absolute micro minority somehow had the ability to mobilize capital and funnel behind their causes to an extent that it became much more vocal. And then, as you said, Manu, the Indian state sort of went overboard in terms of reacting to it and create a monster out of a molehill.
My anecdotal conversations in Canada, because I was really surprised when I saw those posters on the gurudwaras. I would, whenever I saw Sikh, I would have a conversation about this. And usually the response would be two or three things, right? One is that there is a minority of three, four, five leaders per gurudwara who are influencing that whole conversation, and they are driving the agenda. Most of the Sikhs who go to the gurudwara go there to pray and they leave. They don't think about it, they don't talk about it. But the leadership there, they also have control over the budgets of Gurudwara. And so often they're using those budgets there to spread the message that you just outlined. The second thing I encountered with a lot of the conversations was that, hey, like the farmers issue, we're hearing it from back home, is a concern, and we don't want there to be an anti-Sikh sentiment on the ground. I don't think that was our reality, but that was a reality that I came across when I spoke to Sikh migrants on the ground. But it had nothing to do with this idea of Khalistan. In fact, if and when I did have the conversation and I asked that question maybe 2 or 3 times, do you think Punjab should be a different state or Khalistan should be a different state? The answer would be like, it makes no sense. Like, why would we do that, right? So I don't think it is as much an issue. I think you're right. One thing I want to point out is Ajit Doval has publicly said this idea of, is it defensive offense? This idea that India should take sort of appropriate measures before they become a problem, right? And I think that might be at play here as well. As much as I agree with you, Manu and Rajat, that I don't think it is as big an issue as we think.
So with that issue, which is sort of really, I think, spawned a massive bilateral showdown, likes of which we haven't seen in recent times. And it sort of so happened to be on a week when the External Affairs Minister of India visited Islamabad, which is, something which I would have loved to have sort of spoken within great detail, because I'm someone who believes that these back channels, and of course the external affairs ministers must continue to meet. We should not ever not keep any country in our no fly to list, and so on. But perhaps I think Ruchir and Rajat, we should wrap up now with have you heards, and maybe keep Pakistan for next week when we can devote more time, because that is something that I think where bilateral relations have had much greater impact on our two countries than India and Canada. But Richard, do you want to go ahead with have you heards, and do you have anything that you have heard or seen or witnessed this week that has shocked or amused you to a great extent?
I think it piqued my curiosity. Obviously, like we all saw the crazy catching of the rocket with the two hands, which seemed like an incredible feat. It is an incredible feat, and of course, like most of our lives, we will pass by, and somebody like Elon Musk does what he does. But what was the interesting part, and this is like a true entrepreneur, is he follows that up with, hey, we may be at a place where we can do $200 per kilo of payload to space. But if we really want to be, a civilization, or if we want humanity to be interplanetary, we have to still do 1000x. We have to reduce the cost 1000x more for this to be viable. So he went into this tweet, which I loved, which spoke about in detail the amount of work that needs to happen over the next 40 years in terms of improvement in rocket technology around reducing the cost of payload for this to be sustainable and actually make us a proper species that lives on multiple planets. I thought that was fascinating on the work still needed despite the miracle that we saw this week.
Absolutely. And Mr. Musk again telling us all that borderline mental nuts always goes along with great scientific sort of changes. So thank you, Ruchir. Rajat, you're not a stranger to our have you heard section. So anything that has caught your eye or imagination the last few days or week that you want to share?
I'll just pick from where Richard left. He talked about how Elon Musk is building, and let me talk about an anecdote where things are about breaking. China, just this week, it was all over the news that China used quantum annealers to actually break open the RSA encryption and substantially weaken the AES encryption. For the non-geeks, this means that all our military encryption, all our encryption with the most common encryption tools being used and deployed by BFSI, banking finance sector, or our health records, everything becomes prone to this risk of what China has proven, that they have actually used publicly available quantum annealers, which to break into RSA, which so far some of the best researchers still thought it is decades and decades out in the future, because nobody can build such massive quantum computers which has the compute ability to actually break open the RSA. But after this research paper became public, everybody is shell shocked. All the our security establishment, the armed forces, police administration, intelligence, everybody is scared. Like, where is China snooping? So this is a story about breaking things apart.
And this is coming in the last week. There's been petitions filed before the High Court where there's been huge data breaches. I don't know if you know of the Star Health Insurance.
It's all part of that. AIMS data being breached, Star Health Insurance, Max also has been breached in the past. So somehow, health data is really important for people who are trying to break it open and steal that data.
It's the new oil, health data. Mine is sort of veering back to my own profession. So just a little while earlier, I think today or perhaps yesterday, I forget which, the Lady Justice, which is the symbol of justice, right, has been replaced. I don't know why, or not replaced, modified, with another lady, a more Indian looking lady, I think. I can't really tell from the pictures, but definitely a lady wearing an Indian sari, as opposed to the erstwhile attire. The other significant changes, two in particular, are that the lady has now lost her blindfold in the new version. She's I guess, blinded, and the sword is replaced with a book which looks like the Constitution, which I think everyone presumes to be the Constitution. Now, I think it's interesting because it is symbolic, right? And when the courts and the judiciary are not expected to do only things that are symbolic, but this seems to be something that they wanted to do. The replacement of sword with the Constitution is very significant. But then, I mean, the Constitution and by extension, the laws of the country still penalize. And essentially, the sword is supposed to say that, we will penalize you if you do something wrong also. And that is really the power of the judges. But taking the blindfold was to show that now everybody can be seen, like law is not blind. Of course, the earlier interpretation that has always been given and what we've understood as law students is that justice must be impartial. So the person who's standing in front of you, you need not know who that person is in order to dispense justice. So the way a person looks, whether a person is rich or poor or a man or woman or anything else, should be immaterial, right? But the one sort of critical, I think, place where our media just loves to run with it is they've now called this is like a complete decolonialization. Now, of course, replacing sword with constitution is not per se decolonial. I think that is how countries have evolved as republics. But then they've said that giving up the attire is decolonial because a lot of the media have now understood it as like some sort of a gown that the lady wears. But if a lot of people on first blush, you do think it is like a ball gown, right? A dress. But actually, it's not that. It is a toga. It is a ancient Roman dress which both men and, as you know, women, everybody wore in Rome. And from the ancient sort of Greek god Dike, who was the daughter of Zeus, that was the god associated with justice. The Romans adopted that concept and came up with Justitia, who's the goddess of justice. So really, I think we've de-Romanized ourselves, not decolonized ourselves. Nevertheless, I think it's an interesting change. If you see new lady justices, being in lawyers' offices or lawyers' logos or courts, then apparently this is all being done as a modern interpretation of lady justice. So that's my have you heard and seen.
And actually, maybe they'll change the name too, right? No longer Lady Justice. I mean, We should speculate. Thank you all. Rajat, a special thanks to you for coming on the show and talking politics. Always so nice to have someone with your acumen join us. Manu, is always wonderful to have you. We love to hear from all of you. If you have any feedback, please email us at indiadialoguepodcast@gmail.com. You can find us as well on Twitter or X. Rajat is at Rajat Sethi 86. Manu is at Manuraj1983. I'm at Ruchir _P. The podcast is at TID_podcast. You can also find us on YouTube, Apple, or Spotify. Thanks again, and look forward to seeing you again next week. Bye.